There was a major hearing in federal court today in the Middle District of Tennessee before a magistrate judge, Barbara Holmes, in the Abrego Garcia criminal matter. That's right. Abrego Garcia was sent back to the United States where he was swiftly detained and indicted on a charge of conspiracy to commit trafficking and trafficking, where he's being held in prison right now in Tennessee. Today's hearing was what's called a detention hearing. Abrego Garcia entered a plea as the proceedings took place of not guilty before the magistrate judge, Judge Barbara Holmes. And then we got to the detention hearing part. Now, the MeidasTouch network actually had eyes and ears inside the courtroom with a channel that we are affiliated with, the All Rise channel, the great channel being led by one of my favorite legal reporters out there, Adam Klasfeld, who we'll be hearing from in just a little bit of what went down. Adam, it's good to see you. So we have this detention hearing that takes place today, and Abrego and his lawyers are basically saying, what is this indictment even really about? You're saying that Abrego is involved in human trafficking, and the really only detailed allegations is a 2022 traffic stop where Abrego Garcia was in this, large SUV or van with like 6 or 7 other people. And even the police in Tennessee didn't think there was any real basis to even arrest them. And nobody in the federal prosecutor's office ever considered that there was a crime that was committed. That's why you even had the leader of the criminal division, that guy, Ben Schrader, a few weeks back, quit when he found out that the DOJ was going to be weaponized and to try to use this 2022 traffic stop as a hook for human trafficking charges against Abrego, so they could basically give a scalp to the DOJ's office after the embarrassment the Trump regime's been put through by unlawfully deporting Abrego Garcia. The Supreme Court ruling facilitate his return. So Abrego's lawyers are like, in this detention hearing, there's no reason. Look, we're going to argue this case before a jury one day, but why in the world would you not release him? Who is he a threat to because of a traffic stop? That's why you are. That's why you want to keep him detained forever. So then you saw what a flimsy case the prosecutor had, and they try to say, well, there may have been like a minor in the car, and this may be minor smuggling that they're bringing up. And then they're like, there's no evidence of that, the attorneys for Abrego said. And then they're like, yeah, we've got our sources. And the sources, as the defense lawyer Shabazz pointed out over and over again, they're like, this is a snitch, someone who's already been deported 5 times. You just found somebody when Abrego got famous just to give your agent a bunch of BS about him in order to feed you this information. And then I'll let you tell the rest of it. But then the prosecutor, it was from weird what I've been reading about your report. The prosecutor was kind of like, I picked a short straw. I'm not even sure why I'm even here today, or I don't even really want to even be here today. So why would I be in any way suborning perjury? I'm just doing my job here. And then in any event, you should keep Abrego Garcia detained, because even if you release him, ICE is able to deport him, and Customs and Border and Department of Homeland Security, they just can't deport him to El Salvador. So even if you release him, he's going to be released into ICE custody, and then he'll probably get deported somewhere else. And then the judge was like, why do I care about that? I'm just here to rule on what I'm here to rule on. Is he a threat, basically? So take it from there. You were in the court. That was my summary of your reporting. So tell us what went down.
So you got most of the points there, Ben. But what I'll say is the identity of the lawyer you were talking about. That's the U.S. attorney for this district. And for your listeners and viewers, that is very unusual. That is the top dog of the Middle District of Tennessee arguing for himself. Usually you send in the assistants, and he had a bad day in court. You quoted Mr. Shabazz earlier. He described the entire case as a house of cards built on the backs of these cooperating witnesses. And one of those cooperating witnesses, described as a mastermind of this immigrant smuggling conspiracy, is serving a 30-year sentence. Now, what comes out during the hearing? This cooperator, CC1, is getting a preferable treatment, that he's getting leniency on his prison sentence. He's now in a halfway house, and also favorable treatment with his immigration situation. You have another key witness related to him, a close relative, CC3, who was also in jail. Again, getting leniency from the government, a key source of the allegations. And back to CC1, you mentioned this. He's been deported from the country 5 times. So think about this in the bigger picture. The Trump administration saying, we want to get dangerous, criminal, undocumented immigrants out of the country. Well, they're giving immigration assistance to 2 of them, according to the testimony that came out in the court. And that was testimony by one of the FBI agents on the case, who was pressed about that, asked, did you offer any of these breaks to these cooperating witnesses? He replied emphatically, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, he said after that, when questioned, did he know? I said, I would never offer any sort of break to a cooperating witnesses without taking it up the chain. So we don't know how high up the chain authorized these breaks for 2 people who were convicted of serious enough crimes that they were serving those sentences, that they're getting favors with immigration, they're getting favorable treatment on their criminal case, and we don't know the exact circumstances of those deals. And I've been covering the courts for nearly 2 decades. It's not unusual for cooperating witnesses to get some sort of favorable treatment. What is unusual is for the mastermind of the alleged conspiracy to get favorable treatment, to get one guy who was allegedly involved in this traffic stop that raised suspicions for nearly 3 years ago. And then an investigation only begins this April 28th. That's when the investigation began, after the Supreme Court came down hard on the Trump administration, said you must facilitate Mr. Abrego's release. It was weeks after that the investigation began, the same day that Tom Homan was giving a White House press conference defending the government's conduct. That's when it begins. 3 weeks later, an indictment built on these cooperating witnesses, going after one of the alleged smallest fish of this alleged conspiracy. And let's take this traffic stop. One of the things that came out in court, again, highlighted by Mr. Shabazz. If you look at that footage, and it's floating around the internet, any of your viewers can watch it, there is a drug-sniffing dog. Remember, although he is not charged with anything related to drugs, without anything related to firearms, the government went out of the way to, throw the scent of that, to throw the smears of that. But there is a drug-sniffing dog who finds nothing. The troopers let him go in late 2022. No one thinks anything of it until about 2.5 years later, when it suddenly becomes the foundation of this case, built on the testimony of 2 people, even by the government's testimony. The government's arguments on it are high up on the chain.
Adam, this raises, I think, a few points. Number one, due process is very important, because seeing this play out in court, regardless of what the result is, this adversarial system of a judge seeing evidence, testing your evidence, putting it out there, that's what our system is based on. I think today, whatever the judge rules, we'll respect that ruling, but you got to put up evidence. That's just what at a bare minimum, that's what our system is all about. But 2, the fallback position, the heads I win, tails you lose position of the United States attorney who's arguing because literally no one else is going to do it. And he's basically the top person. And so he can't literally find another lawyer to do it, is when he says, we want you to keep Abrego detained because if we release him, then he may get deported from ICE. Well, no one's ever fought this concept that he can be deported by ICE to a country other than the concentration camp, other than CCOT in El Salvador. Had the Trump regime sent him to any other, quite literally any other country, but the one where there's an order saying you can't, that's it. That was the process that he was given in an immigration case. By the way, I thought that evidence in the immigration case was shoddy at best, hearsay on top of hearsay, but that was the ruling. They had the ability to do it, so do it. You can still do that tomorrow. And the fact that they're so intent, though, on sending him back to this El Salvador concentration camp and now using this case in their own wacky mind as a pretext to overrule the other immigration results, so then they can now justify on new charges running him through the system and sending him back to El Salvador. It's like, why are we spending all of these resources? Why are we doing this? And I think that's ultimately why the Ben Schrader guy who led the criminal division left, because to me, no matter where you are on this, I'm not like trying to be an Abrego Garcia like fanboy. I don't know if he was driving people and he was serving as a mule for a trafficking ring, and you ultimately find that he's guilty of that. Just say why are you making it out like this guy some, Pablo Escobar level sex trafficker of minors, so that you can act like a tough guy? You say what he really is. Let the repercussions be what the repercussions are. And let's just go through the system as we always used to do in America. What the hell is this? I'll let you get the final word.
Well, one of the things you said, Ben, think about how far into the twilight zone we are here. One of the arguments about where this all came up is risk of flight. The risk of flight is that if you release him, Judge, we might deport him somewhere else. And they might not win on that. They might lose again, just as the Trump administration keeps losing on other things. One of the defenses is, if you deport him to Mexico, Mexico might deport him right back to CCOT. And that's the same harm that he was prohibited from being deported to El Salvador because he was facing persecution there. So that's called chain deportation. But it's a twilight zone argument when you're suddenly saying that he's a risk of flight because we might send him somewhere. That's not what due process is about. This whole day is about due process, that he's finally answering the allegations, and you have a judge who's highly skeptical of those allegations. And if the judge's ruling ultimately comes out against the Trump administration, your viewers and listeners should remember this is a magistrate judge. So when they attack the judge and they claim that this is about politics, this is not a political appointee, not appointed by a Democrat or a Republican. This is someone who handles pretrial decisions like detention matters. And so when this ruling happens, this isn't about politics. This is about the law. And judging from what I saw today, from early in the morning to the end of the working day, it did not go well for the government.
Any other observations, being personally in there and seeing the personalities, seeing the United States attorney that's just stood out to you being in that courtroom?
I would say that he absolutely realized that he was having a rough reception. You could tell that he, even remarked at one point about how it was an accident that he's even there. He's an acting U.S. attorney. And I want to emphasize that again. He's an acting U.S. attorney because he is not Senate confirmed. And that's why it is, as I said a little earlier, a little twilight zone that we're here, that someone who isn't Senate confirmed, didn't send his assistant, sent himself to federal court to argue this case and say that if you release him, we, the government, might have something else up our sleeve.
And we probably realized after the head of their criminal division, Ben Schrader, resigned on LinkedIn that if he didn't show up himself and forced other people, there would be other resignations and he wouldn't even have an office at all. So I think he had to show the people, look, I'll take one for the team here just to be able to even have an office. And that speaks volumes of, I think, the damage Trump is doing to the Department of Justice. I'll just give everyone my own perspective as, someone who was a litigator for 13 years who went against the government. The DOJ lawyers were always like the best of the best. Like that's just what their reputation was known for. And the idea of the DOJ being sloppy and losing cases, that was never the MO of the DOJ. Not to say that never happened, but they're buttoned up top lawyers from top law schools who usually handle business. So to see them almost behave, and Adam, I know in your reporting, you've covered some very good lawyers and some very sloppy lawyers. And sometimes when you're in the courtroom and you're there before the proceedings before, you'll see a lot of lawyers. And sometimes I'm sure you'll be like, how these people even pass the bar? Like that's the quality of lawyering, though, that Trump is turning the Department of Justice into. And so, that's my own personal observation, although I wasn't in the courtroom. Adam, we should do more updates like this. What I really love about your reporting is you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. You're in those courthouses every day, living it, experiencing it, and you're the firsthand source of this that I frequently rely on for my reports because I can't be in there. You're the one who's on the front lines, watching the witnesses, watching the judge, watching the lawyers. Thanks for all you do at All Rise on Substack, and we got to get you on more often here as well.
Thank you. Well, the next time that this hearing happens, All Rise News will be on the case and will be on the ground. And we've found that folks really do connect with the idea of live court coverage. So we're happy for the support. We're happy for the platforms that you at MeidasTouch bring to it, and the focus on the nationally significant case that goes to this fundamental right, due process.
All rise, all subscribe. Let's get to 5 million. Thank you.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.